Please welcome Flavien Charlon, Coinprism.
Hello everyone, my name is Flavien Charlon and I'm the CEO and founder of Coinprism. Coinprism is a blockchain technology company based in Dublin in Ireland, and we're bringing blockchain technology to the enterprise. So a few words about the company. Coinprism was one of the first companies to start working on blockchain technology. About 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago, we started to work on the concept of colored coins, and we formalized it into an open specification called the Open Assets Protocol. So Open Assets picked up traction over the past couple of years, and beginning in 2015, Nasdaq announced that they were using the Open Assets Protocol for their private market platform pilot. A few weeks later, Overstock announced that they were using it for issuing corporate bonds on the Bitcoin blockchain. So in the past couple of years, talking to a lot of clients looking to tokenize assets onto a blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain in particular, we realized one important thing, which is that the Bitcoin blockchain, or more generally, any public blockchain, Ethereum as well, are kind of inefficient for this kind of use cases. So there's a few reasons. First of all, they're slow. So in the case of a public blockchain, you need to establish a consensus with thousands of nodes across the world. But even in the case of a consortium blockchain, you still have to establish a consensus across a few dozen nodes, and they might be in different locations. So network latency is going to translate into latency to confirm transactions. So a few seconds to confirm a transaction is much better than 3 days, of course, but it's still too high for latency-sensitive applications like trading. It's also expensive because you need to incentivize the miners to validate your transactions. So you need to pay fees for every single transaction. And then, so the second problem is that on a public blockchain, you have to share the infrastructure with companies that might be unrelated to you. So those companies might be competing for the same resources as you, and so they will be driving your costs up for no obvious benefit. And secondly, you might even have to share the same chain as your competitors, and so this can be a problem for privacy. And then the third problem is governance. So in the case of a public blockchain, it's not clear who's responsible for the transactions happening on the chain, because it's shared by a lot of different organizations. And so for highly regulated industries like financial services, this is a big problem. So our solution is called Openchain. And Openchain is a private chain software. So we launched the first version of that in October last year. So the idea is that any business, any company can take the software and deploy it within their own organization to create their own blockchain. So they become administrators of that blockchain, and they can then set up some rules depending on the business requirements they have. So after that, they can then start bringing their customers and users onto the chain, and they can start transacting. So what it means is that there's going to be a lot of different chains. There's going to be basically one chain per asset. But the thing is, you can still connect the chains together using a sidechain type system if you need to. So as a few examples, if you're a bank, you might be using a currency-based chain, which you would use to represent deposits and loans to your customers. A government could use it as a property registry chain, which would be tracking any kind of property transaction in the country and then exposing it in a public fashion. So there are many benefits to Openchain. First of all, of course, digital signatures, which provide non-repudiation. And this is important so that you can use the chain as evidence in court if you need to. Also, immutability and transparency. This is key to blockchain. And this provides settlement finality, which is extremely important in the capital market. But this is not how Openchain actually differentiates itself. It differentiates itself in 2 points. First of all, performance. So in terms of scalability and latency, Openchain can process thousands of transactions per second on commodity hardware, such as a normal laptop, and a lot more on dedicated hardware, like a cluster of dedicated hardware. In terms of latency, we can process transactions in about 10 milliseconds in average, which is extremely fast. And the second differentiator is compliance. So Openchain is very flexible. It has a lot of APIs that let you customize the way that the chain operates. So you can program a lot of different rules into it, for example, AML and KYC, but obviously more advanced things as well. In terms of the go-to-market strategy, we're partnering with accounting and auditing firms. So those firms have a lot of clients who are looking for blockchain technology solutions, but they don't necessarily have the expertise in-house to build it, so they're turning to us to provide these solutions. So we're currently working with Deloitte, KPMG, and Grant Thornton, and we also have a partnership with Microsoft. So Microsoft is currently offering Openchain as part of their Microsoft Azure cloud computing platform. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Could you describe the protocol that you're using, the technology stack?
Yeah, so the technology stack, it's all like the code is not based on Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything else. It's made from scratch. Because the reason is that we actually took a very simplistic approach in terms of the consensus, where instead of having a consensus with many nodes, there's always one miner per given asset. So you would have like maybe a JP Morgan US dollar validating node, and then a Bank of America US dollar validating node. There would be different nodes, and they would validate different transactions. But because of that, we can do all those improvements in terms of scalability and so on. And because it's kind of a simpler model than proof of work or proof of stake. So instead of starting from a complex stack like Bitcoin or Ethereum, we started from scratch and built the minimum amount that we needed to build so that it remains simple. So simplicity is kind of key here in terms of both performance, scalability, and everything.
So in the case of JP Morgan, it's fine for them to have solo input into the, they are consensus, in fact, for themselves in their transactions.
Yeah, because basically like that chain would manage deposits that they have on their balance sheet. So it makes sense for them to validate all the transactions. You don't want to give away like the right to manage your deposits to other banks. That doesn't really make sense in a lot of cases. So that's why in that case, every bank would have their own validating node, and then you could still connect them via sidechains, but it's not always necessary to do that.
What's the revenue model? And then talk a little bit more about interoperability as you're building a very encrypted, encased workflow in an intranet, in a private blockchain, a private ledger with your technology. So what's the security model there, and the interoperability, and then the revenue models, those three items?
Okay, so the revenue model, it's kind of in two parts. There's the short-term part and then the longer term. So in the short term, we're basically helping like different organizations, that could be like banks, that's also like some startups, to customize Openchain for their needs. So it's basically proof of concepts. We help them implement things. We provide support if they need. So that's kind of the short term. And we're learning what the needs are, so what they actually want, what's important to them. And as we learn that, we will package everything into a software as a service offering in the future when we have a lot of understanding. And then that would be a more scalable approach where we can just onboard users by just having them go into a web page, and then they create their chain. And then we would provide hosting for them, hosting of the chain. We would secure everything. And then we provide like reporting tools, dashboards, monitoring and everything for them. So the software itself is actually open source, but we would provide all those services around it. And so, yeah, the other question was around interoperability, is it? So we actually have a sidechain kind of gateway that at the moment, the only one we have works with Bitcoin. So you can actually make deposits on the Bitcoin blockchain, which will be transferred onto Openchain. So you can do that. But the same concept can be applied to other chains. So you could imagine a gateway that connects to Ethereum, a gateway obviously that will connect multiple Openchain chains. So it's basically it would use that sidechain type of interoperability, I guess.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.